The SWAC schedule is so stacked this week that they make up all of our extra games to watch. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. The SWAC schedule makes up all of our games to watch this weekend, the extra ones. Of course, we have our game of the week tomorrow, but our extra games to watch, they make up all of them. And it's so stacked that each one gets its own segment today. You have Grambling versus Alcorn, in which Grambling is fighting another big-time SWAC West battle, this time against the Braves. Before that, FAMU versus Southern has a lot of parallels to an earlier matchup of FAMU versus Alabama State. And ironically, both teams have already played the Hornets. So let's see how these two teams will match up. But before any of that, when it comes to this one, I ain't gonna lie. I feel like Bernie Mac and Def Comedy Jam. Kick it. Because look, y'all just don't understand. I don't have a more vocal fan base on here outside of Jackson State. I don't. And I understand that I get a lot of love. And when things go bad, I get a lot of the other way too. But I ain't scared of you, mother. All right? Because Alabama A&M and Jackson State are fighting for their SWAC championship lives this Saturday. Crystal cut. If Jackson State loses this game, it's over for them. And if Alabama A&M loses this game, it's all but over for them. They're both fighting for their lives. But let's set the scene. FAMU currently stands at the top of the conference, but most specifically, the SWAC East, with 0 conference losses. Both of these teams already have one. Whoever loses this game will now have 2. That's how math works. But they will have 2 conference losses. When you look at Jackson State, because they are way different than Alabama A&M in this situation. If Jackson State loses this game and goes to 2 losses, they've already lost to FAMU, meaning a tiebreaker will not swing their way. So now you wouldn't need the Rattlers to only lose 2 games. You would need the Rattlers to lose 3 games. And I don't see that happening. Now, when you look at Alabama A&M, it's all but over for them. They still get to face FAMU. So if they lose to this game or they lose this game against Jackson State, they could still technically beat FAMU and need FAMU to lose one other game. That's not crazy. I don't think it happens personally, but that's not crazy. The way better alternative is for you to win this game. The problem with that is, look, I like to drive on highways. I can get where I need to get on the road, but I personally am a highway driver. So there's different routes to get to the same way, but I like to choose the easiest route for me, and that's the highway with no stoplights. As for Alabama A&M, they could lose this game and still somehow get there, but if they just beat Jackson State and they beat FAMU, they still control their own destiny. See, that's the difference. If Jackson State loses this game, they need a lot to happen. Alabama A&M loses the game, they still need a little bit to happen, but if they win this game, then they control their own destiny. Now, you might be asking, well, what about Jackson State and tiebreakers in 3-way ties? Okay, let's get into that because that's something that I explored a little bit earlier. If you lose this game, 3-way ties really kind of go out of there. If we're just going to be honest, let's get into it. It's 4 teams in the SWAC East, right? Not total, but 4 teams that we're really focusing on to be able to be actual contenders. I don't think anybody's looking at Mississippi Valley State as a contender. I don't. So what we're looking at right now is FAMU, Jackson State, Alabama State, Alabama A&M. Those are the 4 teams that we're really looking at. FAMU is going to be in that tiebreaker no matter what. Let's say that JSU has 2 losses. You can't lose to Alabama State at any point. Now, you can't lose to them because you have to stay at 2 losses. Alabama State already has 2 losses. That would bring them down to 3. That removes a 3-way tiebreaker with them, and now it's just you and FAMU. But maybe you get into a tiebreaker with you, FAMU, and Alabama A&M. That only likely happens. Well, first off, if you lose this game, forget all the trying to be intricate about it. If you lose this game and you are in a 3-way tie with A&M, Florida A&M, and Alabama A&M, right? The A&Ms, you lose because you lost to both of those teams. If you're in a 3-way tie, well, you're not going to be in a 3-way tie with Alabama State and FAMU, but let's say somehow you do and y'all all get to 3 losses. FAMU beat both of you. 3-way ties no longer work if you lose this game. That's important. Once again, Alabama A&M gets to control their own destiny. If they win out, they win the conference. But if you're looking at Alabama A&M and they lose this game, FAMU could lose to Bethune. Are you ever going to count that out? FAMU could lose to Bethune, and if Alabama A&M beats FAMU, doesn't matter what happens here, you win it. You are in the conference championship game. So that's something that needs to be looked at. From a team perspective, them fighting for their lives is the biggest storyline in this game. From a smaller perspective, which is the individual, you have Quincy Casey, who is going in there, and he's going to be facing his former team. And Coach Maynard already said, let's not make this personal. Because if you make this personal and you get out of body, you're going to be sitting right here next to me. And we're going to be watching the game together from the sideline while whoever the next quarterback who goes in is going to be playing. So he's already set this guideline. Said, look, continue to play the way that you played. And that's something I think needs to be touched on from my perspective. A lot of people were very impressed with Alabama A&M versus UAPB. And for some reason, that didn't hit me. I'm not sitting here saying they garbage or anything like that, but I have kind of been a little bit dismissive of the Bulldogs. And frankly, that game against UAPB that impressed people, it didn't connect to me. It didn't. I didn't sit there and see bad offense, but I was just like, okay. Just kind of a shrug of the shoulders. And I watched that game pretty much from start to finish. I think I might have came in 2 minutes into the game or something like that. This is one of those ones where I'm looking for Alabama A&M's offense to show something to moi. Everybody else, they got what they got. But me, I'm still looking for something else from them. And if they look good in this game, that will prove something to me. This will prove something to me because I do think that Jackson State has a solid defense. So you do this against an eye level. And last week, you put a 48 on Tuskegee. That's great. That's great. That's great. That's great. That's great. You know, it's like Coach Maynard said, we expected to beat Tuskegee. Maybe not the way we did. I feel the same way. So that was impressive. I'll give you that. But now I'm looking at eye level opponents. How does your offense perform? And that's something I'll be looking at, but specifically Quincy Casey, because Coach Maynard already said, you better stay in your body. Do not make this one too personal. Even though he said, I know Casey probably is going to want it more than anybody else on this team. So I'll be looking at that. Quincy Casey, can you keep it from being personal? And by keeping it from being personal, can you impress them out to the South, please? But that's all I want to see. But as we move forward, we have another one. Like I said, we stand in the SWAC today. Tomorrow, we will have the MEAC, and that is North Carolina Central versus Elon. So just a little bit of a preview for you. But today, it's all about the SWAC. And we have FAMU versus Southern with some parallels to a previous matchup. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. And listen, Alabama A&M feels like they have found their quarterback. And sometimes a perfect team is about finding all of the right pieces. And the same thing can be said about your car. You have to make sure you find the right pieces for your car. And with eBay Motors, that makes things so much easier because they have over 120 million parts. Okay. Now, here's the thing. You put your car into the garage, whatever it is. Say you got a Cadillac Escalade, right? You put your Escalade into the My Garage section, and all of the pieces that come up will fit your car guaranteed. And if they don't, you get your money back. But listen, you're not getting your money back because it's going to fit. You don't need to worry about it. It's money well spent. Go to ebay.com/motors. That's ebay.com/motors. And it's going to have the right fit, right parts, all made and all custom fit for your car. No need to worry about it. That's ebay.com/motor. eBay Motors. Let's ride. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. And remember, on tomorrow's episode, on tomorrow, period, not the episode, but tomorrow, we will have our 10 a.m. to noon Central Time live college football kickoff show, and I'll be a part of that, given the extra games. With all of these games that I have in front of me today, I don't know how I'm going to boil it down to 2. I might have to go to 3. Who knows? But I will see how we do it. But I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, today. Now, FAMU versus Southern is going to be a really good game. And matter of fact, I feel like it has some parallels to a previous really good game that we saw this year, FAMU versus Alabama State. Excuse me. But yeah, there's some similarities in that. FAMU is FAMU. Oh, I'm so clever for that one, right? But FAMU is FAMU in this situation. But then Southern and Alabama State are so similar. They're so similar that they faced off this year, and it was only 4 points difference. And I walked out feeling the same kind of way about both. Man, these defenses are good, but the offenses, I need to see more. And I know that we said these things about D. Davis, but something just didn't sit right with me with this Davis situation. And I'm sitting there like, we need to see more. And then eventually, Damon Stewart ends up starting. But with Southern, and listen, I'm not absolving FAMU's offense. Let's just be clear. I know I said we might break it down, but we didn't have time to. I just didn't find the segment and the placement for it. And maybe if it happens again this week, we'll talk about it. I don't know. But FAMU has had their offensive struggles, and their struggles have been with consistency. The same thing with Southern. It's a little bit different than Alabama State. With Southern, it's been consistency. I don't know how often we can put together drives, and why do we stall out in the second half? For FAMU, they often get it together, and their spurts are stronger. Let's just say you're inconsistent. Let's not judge when the inconsistencies happen. Even though that's important, let's take that out of the equation for the moment. FAMU spurts are better. When FAMU goes on their strong points, it's like they finally get it together and they know exactly what to do and they got it. So when I see, and I think just overall, I just trust them. I just trust FAMU's offense more, even though they've had the same inconsistency criticisms that can be placed upon them. I just personally feel like when I look at Jeremy Moussa, when I look at Marcus Riley, when I look at Yant, when I look at John Murray Sheree, when I look at these players, I just feel a little bit more confident because I've seen them do it at a higher level. Even if we've questioned if the frequency might be the same, but the level is not. The level is not. I think FAMU has been a better offense. If you ask me, okay, you have Alabama State, and I won't continue putting the Hornets into this, but you have Alabama State, Southern, and you have FAMU, and you can take any of their offenses. Who are you going to take? If I went and asked 50 people, I think the vast majority would say FAMU, and I'd be in the vast majority. That's kind of what it is. I just trust them more. If they need to make a play, I'm going to trust them to make a play. And the defense is great. I think that Dark Cloud defense is amazing. So it's things like that. But this is a parallel between this game and then also the Alabama State game, where I could see things being very difficult. If you're looking at Jeremy, I was going to name John Murray Sheree, Marcus Riley, Jeremy Moussa. If you're looking at Jeremy Moussa to suddenly have this I figured it out game, if it happens against them, I'm going to be really impressed. It wouldn't shock me if he struggles a little bit. If he just struggles the way he did against Alabama State, where they still moved the ball, I think that was a good game. Personally, you're going against a tough defense like that. I thought that was a solid game. But if he struggles, I wouldn't be like, it's just a tough time to struggle. Sometimes people put certain complaints on you, and then the next game you face, it's like, well, this isn't the time. Like, for example, say I'm struggling on offense, and everybody mad about me struggling on offense, and I got to go face the 2000 Ravens. Now people just going to be loud about me struggling on offense, especially if they feel like I'm supposed to be a really good offense. Excuse me, guys. I'm sorry, y'all. I've just really needed some water lately. And I don't know what's going on, but I really have needed water. But Southern's defense, I think, is going to need to force Jeremy Moussa into turnovers. I think they're going to need to make sure that he isn't comfortable. You have weapons on the outside. You have the running back position, but they're going to pass the ball. And Coach Simmons has already put his trust in him. He's already stepped out there and vouched for him. You're going to have to make Moussa very uncomfortable. You're going to have to make sure that he doesn't have time. You're going to have to, because you look at, Shelby, dang, I forgot his last name. But the defensive lineman for Southern, he was just the SWAC Defensive Player of the Week. Had 2.5 sacks. Like, you have to make sure that you have another performance like that, because you already know that they're going to come in to try to get Moussa comfortable. So I would assume that they're going to come in with a bunch of quick passes and things of that nature. You have to disrupt that. You have to make sure that they're in third and long so that they have to press the ball down the field. You're going to make sure that they're in third and long so now you can get your pressure on them, because I do think they're going to try to make sure that he's comfortable. They might simplify things. They might have more screens because Riley and Shareed are both really dynamic players who you get the ball to them just in space, period, and they can make something happen. That's what I would do if I was Willie Simmons. Now, that being said, if I'm Southern, I'm making sure that I'm forcing turnovers because I don't trust my offense. And I feel like I might need to make plays on my own. I'm not saying you need to score points, but it would help. But I'm not saying you need to score points. You just need to make sure that you're keeping points off the board. Like I told Alabama State, I say the same thing to Southern. Keep this game low scoring. And maybe the most exciting part about this game is the fact that this could be a SWAC championship preview. And I've talked a lot about Prairie View being the front runner. I've said Grambling is the big dog now, but Southern is undefeated in conference play. Regardless of what happens in this game, they still get to face Alcorn. They still get to face PV. They still get to face Grambling. They still get to face pretty much everybody. They haven't faced the West yet. Side note, FAMU has a really good conference schedule. Like they play PV, they play Grambling, or excuse me, they don't play Grambling. They play PV, they play Southern, and they play TSU. And TSU looks worse now, but coming in, that was a solid West schedule. Like that was a really good West schedule. Anywho, and one could say that TSU and PV switched places because PV didn't look that good at the beginning of the year, but now they look really good. TSU looked pretty good at the beginning of the year. Now it doesn't because, injuries and whatnot. But this is a solid West schedule nonetheless. Only thing that could have been better if they switched TSU with Grambling. Like that's it. But where was I? Because I definitely lost my train of thought. Oh, Southern. They're 2-0 right now. They could lose this game. They still get to go through and face PV, Grambling, Alcorn. Anybody who stands in their way, they still have the chance to play. So it doesn't really matter what happens in this game. Of course, you want to win it because you don't want to lose all conference games ranked the same or weigh the same. So you don't want to lose a conference game. But you can make up for it. So regardless of what happens here, we could see another repeat game, kind of like we did last year with Southern and Jackson State. So this is going to be really interesting. I can't wait to watch this game. And it'll be a battle of defenses and whose offense can make more plays. But the defenses are going to be really good. So that's what you'll be looking forward to on Saturday. But we have one more. We're almost done with the SWAC before we get to the MEAC tomorrow. But right now, it's Grambling versus Alcorn because Grambling is facing their second straight really tough SWAC West bout. And we'll look at that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. And Grambling is facing their second huge test in a row. And that's kind of the same. I think PV doesn't have that, but Alcorn has it where last week they faced Alabama State. This week, they're going to face Grambling. Last week, Grambling faced Prairie View. This week, they're facing Alcorn. Like, these are tough matchups. And honestly, these are meaningful games and allow me to put the SWAC and the MEAC against each other. And this isn't to rub anything in the face, but the size of the MEAC doesn't allow the amount of big games. Like, I don't know if I'll ever do a full show of all MEAC games to watch in this capacity. Because for me, the MEAC builds up to a couple of games. And this isn't a shot or anything like that. But they just build up to a certain amount of games. I just don't think that there's enough teams in the conference for you to sit there and be like, oh, man, they have so many important games after week 2, week 3. Like, we're 3 weeks into the season, and we still don't have a clear picture of anything. We don't really, or on the SWAC West side, I should say, we don't have a clear picture of what's going on in the SWAC West. We're 3 weeks into the season. You still have 3 really huge games. Alabama A&M versus Jackson State is a huge game. You have FAMU versus Southern, big time game. Grambling versus Alcorn, huge game. Like, these are big time matchups this deep into the season, all in conference play, and there's no real rivalry involved. It's just strictly saying these matchups are important, So with the MEAC, for me, it's like 3 teams. Like, once you're 3 weeks into the season, you start having a clear picture of who's going to be what. That's the thing. With only 6 teams in your conference, you already kind of know once you get halfway through the season, okay, or 3 weeks into the season, because it's the same thing with conference play. 3 weeks into the conference play, you know who's who, and you know who's going to be the guys. You know who's not going to be the guys. And maybe you have an upset somewhere along the way. But upsets typically aren't games you're just looking forward to, you know? So that's kind of the difference here where I'm looking at Grambling versus Alcorn. Regardless of who win this game, they still might not get it done. It still might be PV. It still might be Southern. They might not be the team. The winner of this might not be the team that represents the division in the conference championship game. But this is still a big game to me. So Alcorn wouldn't even be at the top. I don't think there's any way that Alcorn can be at the top of this division after this week. It could be a 4-way tie, but I'm not going through 4-way tiebreakers this early into conference play. I'm not. I'm just going to say they all there then. But other than that, you're looking at lost my train of thought for a second. Oh, you're looking at Alcorn, who they're looking to fight to get into this thing. I say Grambling's looking to retain supremacy, but Alcorn's looking to get back in this. If you lose to Grambling and you lose to PV, now things are looking tough for you. They're looking down. You got 2 losses to 2 very important people. Now you got to sit there and hope that Grambling loses some. It's just so much. I'm not going through tiebreakers every single segment. That's not what we came to do. But overall, Grambling is looking for supremacy because they still have no losses. They're looking to knock off PV and now knock off Alcorn, which is 2 of the biggest competitions. And of course, they won't get to face Southern until the last game of the week or the season. So that's something that's well off. You ain't worried about that right now. But you're looking at Alcorn. They currently have 1 loss in the conference. They just had a really big win over Alabama State. And one can say that they were fighting for their lives because they couldn't go in with 2 losses and still have to beat Grambling and Southern. That's tough. That's tough. You still got Jackson State on the schedule. Alcorn has a tough schedule on the way. They already lost to PV. PV sitting here probably rooting for Alcorn. Like, all right, we already taking care of Alcorn. Let's get Grambling 1 loss now. Because as long as PV stays 1 loss under Grambling, PV's at a deficit. They need to be tied with Grambling so that Grambling can lose 1 more game because of tiebreaker reasons, right? So these are big-time matchups. For Alcorn, you have to remember the running game hasn't been that good this year. So you're looking at Aaron Allen at the quarterback position, and you're looking at the duo of Hunt and Rogers at the wide receiver position. That's what I'm looking at. Same thing with Grambling, except they have a running game that's been working. You're looking at Roger, you're looking at Crawley, and you're also looking at Rash. You're looking at, they have a bevy of receivers, like Robinson, like they have so many guys, it's too many to name. But you're looking at those guys. This is a game that has heavy SWAC West implications. And I know I kind of went on a tangent about where the SWAC West stands versus the SWAC stands versus the MEAC, but it's just a little bit different. Overall, this is an important matchup. Forget the other conference. Just focus on them. These are 2 teams who at the end of the day both have heavy SWAC championship aspirations. For Alcorn, you lose another one to a divisional opponent, it's going to be much tougher for you to get there. For Grambling, you're perfect right now. You're 2-0, and you knocked off a big competitor. One could argue your biggest competitor. Now let's knock off your second or third biggest competitor. You have the opportunity to do that in 2 weeks and really assert your dominance over this conference. So what are you going to do? That's my biggest sell for this. Let's rein it in. That's my biggest sell for this game. Tomorrow's episode, we'll be back with a MEAC team against a CAA team. So you have North Carolina Central versus Elon, and this is a game between 2 top 25 teams as well. We'll get into our 3 matchups, our 2 storylines, and our key to victory for only Central. I'm not giving a key to victory for Elon. But we'll get into all of that on tomorrow's episode. So I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day. And until I see you tomorrow, take care, stay blessed. Peace.